Right, thank you guys. So we have not much time, so we're going to have to be concise. You're going to have to tell us where you invest, what's your investment strategy, and whose pitch today that you think is interesting, right? You ready? So you're all coming from very different backgrounds in the way you approach investment and in the way you're structured. So I'd love to hear that from the panel, but first let's do a round of introductions. Can you take 1 minute to present yourself, please? Thank you.
Okay, I'm Tarald Nustad. I'm the founder of Nordic Impact, and I've been doing tech startups and investing for the last 15 years. And then last 5 years, I've been doing more and more social entrepreneurship and impact investing. So we do direct investments in early stage tech impact companies. We do some investing in impact funds. And we also started the Catapult Future Fest as a festival to combine impact investing, technology, and the future society. And we have an accelerator called Catapult that also helps companies that do tech impact scale and get bigger.
My name is Mark Oroz. I'm a managing director with Refugee Openware. We're a hybrid social enterprise with a nonprofit side that builds hardware accelerators and incubators and fabrication labs in conflict zones, and a for-profit side that does angel investing and impact investing strategy. As it relates to this panel here, we're one of the partners that are building a fund for livelihood improvement and job creation in Greece. I can talk more about that in the next couple of minutes.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Kıvanç. I'm a principal at Kois Invest, where I lead our work on innovative finance work around the refugee theme. So as Kois Invest, we're an impact investing and innovative finance firm, where on the one side, we structure funds and invest in social enterprises around specific themes, and on the other side, we develop innovative financing mechanisms, including impact bonds, which I will talk about around the refugee theme, and leasing mechanisms applied to the refugee space around a range of social issues, and refugee theme being one of the focus areas for us.
So hello everyone, my name is Ida Falbakken. I work also in Nordic Impact. What we also run is that we see that we need to work on many levels, and we have call it an exponential organization or a whole ecosystem where we also support initiatives such as TECHFUGEES. So I've been having TECHFUGEES in Oslo a couple of years. It was the first country after UK that we actually had a TECHFUGEE event. And as Tarald said, also in addition to the Catapult Future Festival, we actually are, getting the impact investors to meet the startups, and also having the discussion on what kind of future and what kind of solutions, what kind of society do we want to create.
Okay, thank you. So the concept of impact investment is not new, or this is like the new term now. It's been around for a few years. It's still recent. Can you tell us how you came to invest, become impact investors, and invest in the topic of refugees? Like, what's the story behind it? How did you become aware of that problem? From which angle did you approach it?
As I've said, I've been doing tech startups for the last 15 years, but we also have a family foundation working with aid. And I've been working with Ashoka and social entrepreneurship for a long time. So that's how I started to see that if I combine my tech background and doing good, then I can actually both get more scale and more return on the investment. So we focus on purely commercial market rate returns and technology as a way to provide a good impact. We have a filter where we say impact is the first filter, and if it's a good filter, then we are interested if it's technology and good business. So refugees, we're pretty agnostic as far as impact goes. We do anything that makes the world better, but we anything from education, health tech, energy, financial inclusion. But we have invested directly in one startup that works with the refugees, and also through our accelerator we have 2-3 more. So when we see that there's a big need to help out with the refugee crisis, or as we see it, more to create opportunities out of people that can be reskilled and get jobs and provide more resources?
So for myself and kind of what we do, there's a couple of reasons. I think the first one, I think most of us here at this conference believe in the power of tech. You know, we're in complete, we believe completely that a combination of entrepreneurial solutions that take advantage of kind of new and upcoming tech trends can provide unprecedented change across the world, specifically focused on kind of the refugee situations and also kind of the root causes of that conflict. Additionally, a couple more things that I'll say. One, Mike mentioned co-creation, right? So it's a lot easier to be an investor than an entrepreneur. Through kind of through impact investing, you can kind of focus and facilitate the power of those entrepreneurs to create the impact by themselves. You can self-empower them and kind of let them create solutions that they feel is necessary for their problems. So that's kind of the mechanisms upon which are the fundamental philosophy behind what we do. Personally, I'm a refugee myself. I moved from Bosnia to America when I was, after the war when I was fairly young. So it has a personal connection, obviously, to my experience and kind of what I wanted to do with my life for the last 15 years. So those are that's I think the combination, tech co-creation and then the personal connection that's been driving us and kind of why we moved into impact investing space. Mm-hmm.
For us, as Cois Invest has been doing impact investing over the last 6-7 years in investing in entrepreneurs. It was in 2014 when we launched one of the first social impact bonds in continental Europe that was targeting professional insertion of youth with migrant backgrounds, including refugees, through an NGO called Do for a Job, which matches the unemployed youth with Belgians who are retired or close to retirement, and they go through a mentorship program. So through this work, this was before the Syrian crisis hit Europe. The Syrian crisis was already in full swing, but the migrant waves had not yet hit Europe. That's when we had already talked about unemployment in Molenbeek, which many of you might be familiar with the infamous neighborhood. So, and once the refugee crisis started becoming even more and more prominent, we started looking at the whole, basically the migrant and the refugee journey, starting from Syria to integration in resettled locations or arrived countries. And there we started looking at how can we leverage this knowledge from the impact bond and leverage innovative financing to address different issues around the migrant journey. So that's why we are right now structuring several different innovative finance products, one being a development impact bond on improving livelihoods for refugees and local population in Jordan, Turkey, and Lebanon. Some of you who were in the last session heard RBK, the Reboot Camp, coding boot camp, among one of the organizations that we aim to scale up through this impact bond. Then we have several other again impact investing mechanisms that we are devising around this theme.
Maybe let's go back to words in impact bond. Does everyone know what is an impact bond?
Who knows impact bonds?
Who knows impact bond? Okay,
Not a
right.
lot.
Please.
Yeah, so basically impact bonds are results-based financing mechanisms whereby private investors, so impact investors, who provide the upfront financing to an NGO or a social enterprise which is delivering a social program. And based on predefined social outcomes that would be achieved, so in the case of, for example, the one we're doing in the Middle East, getting people to employment, sustainable employment, or starting companies that generate net income. Based on predefined social outcomes that are being achieved, the investors can receive a return on their capital. And in the case that those outcomes are not being achieved, they stand to lose part or all of their capital. So in the end, these returns to the investors are being provided back by a group of typically outcome funders who are either foundations, donor governments, or in the case of developed economies, the governments themselves. So it's a way of aligning the incentives of the different parties, so the investors, the NGOs, or the social enterprises, and the donor governments, and making everyone do what they do best.
Thank you. So Nordic Impact is this, you're commercial. You're like interested in commercial business and investing in technology in different, you don't have like a sector specific where you invest in. And Marco, you are from the humanitarian, more like on the ground, trying to empower people and looking at ways to use impact investing to empower people closer to the conflicts, right? It's not about just refugees, it's about the cause of conflict, the roots of conflicts. And Kivon, you're using like a new instrument or new, quite a partnership, like more difficult with bringing parties together to finance this. Can you elaborate, all of you, and give us precise ideas of your investment strategy? What's the size? What are the instruments you're thinking about? And yeah, can you give us a bit more?
Go for it.
Yeah, we usually do direct investing in early stage companies. So typically seed stage 100, 200K, and then we do some investments in funds, which is more like €1 million plus. But in general, yeah, we go in early stage and we support the companies. We have about 40 investments now, 40, 50, and we help them with developing their companies. And yeah, as I said, we're agnostic for sectors, so it needs to be impact first. We need any kind of impact. If it's making the world better, it's good. Then other than that is the team, of course. It's like the most important thing, getting the right people together that can really scale this, and then having a technology. We focus a lot on AI and blockchain as drivers to really scale things and get good impact and good return. And then, of course, a commercial business model or a business potential, because oftentimes we find that companies pivot and change their business model throughout the time we're involved.
So yeah, I'll speak a little bit about our investment strategy. I apologize in advance if this is too financy. So I think the focus of the fund that we're building is investing in companies and providing technical assistance to those companies that can create quality jobs, generate incomes, and increase access to goods and services for refugees, and also the host community in Greece specifically. So I'll start with kind of the geographic focus, because that's the most, in many ways, the most limiting factor for us. And we're focused on Greece initially, at least for the pilot fund that we're building, mainly because I think it lies at the geopolitical fault line in Europe, and it's obviously in EU, and there's a lot of, in addition to the refugee issues that Greece has faced, there's a lot of economic issues, including unemployment and brain drain that Greece has faced. So from a geographic perspective, we're focused on Greece. The most important piece for impact investors is the pipeline, which is the quality of the companies that you're seeing. And once you're focusing yourself on such a small market like Greece, the numbers of companies are become very small. So the investment strategy that we follow is fairly broad, and it needs to be very flexible for us to make good investments that can return and can preserve the capital for our investors. So a couple of things that go into that. We're thinking in terms of the segments. We're looking to invest in entrepreneurs that come from refugee and migrant populations. Number two, we're looking to invest in companies that provide services to migrant and refugee populations. So things like a lot of the tech-driven companies that we see here would fall under that category. And then three, we're looking to make investments into companies that can provide, use the money to provide employment opportunities for those populations. So it's a fairly wide range of companies. So there's a couple of implications that creates for us. One, And I would love to hear if, as we're still kind of in the process of finalizing our strategy, I'd love to hear if other people have any insights on this. But flexible over focus is kind of necessary for us since our geographic focus is so limited. Two, we're looking at something that's very long-term, right? The traditional investors usually go around 10 years. We're looking something more around 15 to provide the kind of the length necessary for our potential investees to mature enough that we could see an exit opportunity. Three, and obviously you can talk more about this, but the traditional way of using equity and debt loans and that kind of debt-based mechanisms is not necessarily kind of the best mechanisms to make an impact in Greece, since exits are very hard to come by. So we're looking at a lot of the innovative finance, like social impact bonds, social impact incentives, social success notes. There's a bunch of these new instruments that are being kind of piloted around in the ecosystem. And I think one of the key problems that we face as impact investors is there's not, I think, a cohesive or a agreed terminology around what these actually are, or have they been proven yet in the space. And then lastly, there's a lot of, this is more for the investor side, there's a lot of impact on how we structure the fund in terms of the management, so the team that provides the investment due diligence and then that provides the services. Since usually in the traditional sphere, there's investors make money and then the fund management takes a percentage of the money. Since our expectations are just preserve the capital, we have to look at innovative ways to and we have such a long-term horizon on expectations. We have to provide innovative ways to fund our management company in terms of looking at blended capital, philanthropic capital to pay the salaries of our folks. So the reason I kind of went to that depth is I want to make sure that people understand how impact investors think about this, since it's not just that I'm evaluating pitches and companies and then not getting back to them or not thinking they're good ones. I have to obviously look at in terms of, I think it's better for everybody if they understand kind of how we look at our business models as well, so that they understand kind of what our motivations are and our objectives. Mm-hmm.
For us, within the refugee theme, our broad approach is really looking at the whole migrant journey and developing, depending on what the challenge and the issue that is being addressed, structuring a financial product that makes sense for that is A, scalable, B, can generate market level returns, and C, has very high social impact. So within that overall broad range, I'm going to talk more specifically about this development impact bond that we're currently structuring for Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey. That one is a $10 to $30 million impact bond that is looking to scale interventions that are creating concrete outcomes in improving livelihoods. And the reason that we're going into I would say a complex mechanism, as you said, it's a partnership model which requires a significant effort in structuring. We recently launched one with the ICRC, International Committee of the Red Cross, on physical rehabilitation in Africa. It took us more than 2.5 years to structure. Hopefully the refugee one won't take that long because the funds are needed quicker than that. But just to show that there's a big effort that needs to go, not just in terms of the structuring work, but bringing together all these different parties who speak different languages and are at times suspicious of each other. And so there's a lot to bring together. So going back to the specifics of the refugee and then DIB is, so we look at organizations that are able to deliver really outcomes that are tangible. And in that limbo, a lot of the organizations, when they report or look at what they're doing, it can be at the output level, so number of people trained or number of companies started, which are, of course, there's a value in it, but then most of the donors or people who provide the financing don't know what that leads to an outcome and further down the line impact. So the objective is really finding these organizations who are able to scale and show really those outcomes, measure them, and show that those outcomes can be achieved. Ideally, you would want to go to the impact level, but when we talk about impact, it's like how do they do how does their welfare change over the next 5 years. And it's great that you're taking that long-term perspective within the constraints of an impact bond. That's typically quite difficult, but we do only look at organizations at least at the outcome level in order to structure this. Then we have affordable housing fund in Belgium that includes some refugee populations. We're looking at financing through a leasing mechanism and innovative shelter solutions. So there's other products as well that again comes up with making sure that there's high impact and social impact and market level returns.
Ida, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, no, I also think that there's like no one, as you said, it's like impact investing has been around for a while, but not really that long time either. And I think in the impact investor circles, there's a lot of discussion of the measurements and what kind of, you know, asset classes the investors are using and what they're investing in. So. And here there has been a lot of conversation about, you know, the UN SDG number 17 and partnership. And I think actually we look at here that there is like a group of investors that are willing to have a longer term perspective and maybe also rethink the original investor model to do impact bonds and other types of strategies, because they want to, and one thing is see that doing good could be good business, and we are like explicitly having that position, but also that we want to go into partnership with organizations and NGOs and just find out, is there any like blended value or blended finance that we can, you know, be part of and activate some of that capital. So that probably has been in philanthropy or just investors that want to swap and think differently of where they put their money. And but I think also there's about like, it's so new in a way that we also need to kind of agree on a language, because there's a lot of things that are lost in translations here. And also you mentioned a little bit of frustration of, are we actually talking the same language, and can the investors talk to the NGOs, and they're sitting with the expertise. So what is needed and what kind of solutions that are needed. So we need their input on you know, finding the right deal flow and pipeline for the investors that we want to do as well.
Yeah, my understanding from seeing all these impact investors is you're all under one umbrella, but you have very different instruments. You have very, very different angles.
Exactly.
And so it's very, like, it's always the same conversation. How do you define impact investment? Well, you do all disagree, and we're not going to go to that discussion. Yeah. We have a bit of time, so I want to open up a bit for anyone who would have one or two questions in the audience. And while we roll up the mics for those questions, I want to ask you, you talked about pipeline, you talked about quality of pipeline. Do you have feedback on the pitches you've seen? We had 42 pitches, I think, in total. What do you have to say to all these pitches?
I think I didn't see all 42, but I saw some that was very interesting, absolutely.
Which one?
Well, I think that symmetry was interesting, ambitious. I like ambitious goals that use technology to really impact people's lives. So, yeah, and I don't remember all the names, but there was quite a few good ones. Of course, TikTok I'm an investor in, so I'm very positive towards them.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I saw, yeah, maybe 1/4, but in general, quite a few that are very interesting. One of the things I noted is, I think every one of the organizations mentioned they need partnerships, but only very few specified what type of partnerships. So if you mean funding, be explicit funding. If it's partnerships, what kind of partnerships you need. Otherwise, it's just becomes a generic term that is hard to act upon.
Any other feedback, Mirko?
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of the pitches. I think the best part is that I think all of us here share a similar vision and similar impact focus. Most of my feedback comes kind of the business side, which is I think there's a wide variety in terms of the pitches that I've seen in terms of where they are right now, whether they're seed stage, or some of these guys are even pre-seed or they're piloting, which is all good. I think for a lot of these companies, I think thinking through, I think specifically clarifying the impact model, and then tying it to specific metrics and a theory of change potentially, or some kind of clear, but much clearer to me at least. I need to see much clearer impact metrics, and then what kind of traction or expectations they want to see. Number one. Number two, I think a lot of business models are unclear. I think it's partly because this is a tough space. I think there's a couple of amazing actually companies here that I think are going to be very, very successful. I mean, TikTok and Needs List and a few others. And I think for the rest, I think whether it makes sense to be a social enterprise or to have a revenue-generating business model is still an open question, and that's okay. It's just from an impact investing perspective, that's where a lot of these innovative financing mechanisms we need to think through for a lot of the companies that might not be ready to have traditional investment mechanisms. So that's kind of general feedback. I was quite impressed by a lot, so thank you for the opportunity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think I also want to follow up on the partnership, and it is a difficult space that we are in. So a clear advice: also find out like what your investors are looking for, and be clear on the metrics, and be clear on also the business model basically, and also ask for advice. Like send us an email or be part of an accelerator program, and I think figure out if it's grants or if it's an investment, because what we are doing are investments, and if you are should be in the grants pockets, that is something different.
Okay. Thank you, guys. We're running out of time. I'm not allowed to do more, and I know you are all taking flights too. So thank you very much for coming. And as Ida said, I think don't hesitate to ask for help or advice. I think and maybe help to clarify your ask if you're pitching. Thank you very much.